Good evening, history buffs. This is John. I'm not in a hookah lounge, actually. This is my living room. I decided to do it in the living room. Hopefully the lighting is not too bad here on the front side of the house. So we're going to be talking about something that is hilarious to me still during World War II. Yeah, there was some humor during World War II, believe it or not. There were dummy divisions. Make-believe divisions in order to sow chaos and misinformation. So we're going to get into that, and we're going to be talking about the one specifically on D-Day. D-Day happened and was successful for the Allies because of a dummy division, one that didn't actually exist. But before we do, we need to go back a little bit, and we need to explain how the board is set up here, okay? Leading up to D-Day. So Adolf Hitler, ever heard of him? The Fuhrer of Germany, Nazi Germany, actually killed 84 of his own generals throughout the span of the Third Reich. Let that sink in for a second. 84 of your brightest military commanders, you have them executed. Now, some of these were because of coup attempts, but in most cases, these generals either ran when they were ordered to stay and fight to the last, they surrendered, or because Hitler himself had made a bad decision in terms of a military strategy, a strategic decision, and then he didn't want to take the blame. So he would blame basically whoever was standing beside him during the time that the decision was made. These were his most trusted, and they were scared to death of him for this reason. So, Operation Barbarossa. Research this. If you're into World War II whatsoever, there are documentaries and everything. You can actually find them, I think, on YouTube. Operation Barbarossa. This was the moment that Adolf Hitler decides by himself, hey, we're going to invade the Soviet Union, our biggest ally in the war. So he is up at the Berkhof, which was his retreat. He liked to take Eva Braun, or Eva Braun, however you guys want to say it. And they would just hang out. It was a vacation spot. But Hitler did a lot of his strategic planning at the Berkhof. And so he calls a meeting, and the generals show up. And he tells them his plan. We're going to invade the Soviet Union. We're going to take on the Red Army. Number one, he didn't expect the Red Army to expect an attack. Why would they? Again, they're your biggest ally, and you already have your hands full. And number two, because of the Blitzkrieg strategy, the Blitzkrieg, for those that don't know, the Germans would, when they invaded, they would send in tanks first, and the tanks would just be going full speed. And they would go right past barricades, right past foxholes, everything that was set up to defend against an invading army. The tanks would just go on past. They would shoot whoever they could shoot, but beyond that, they kept their foot on the gas. And so now you have an entire regiment full of tanks, you know what I mean? Behind you, you don't know where they're at. This causes total chaos, and then the main German force comes up on foot, and here you are, you're totally surrounded at this point, your best defenses. So he says, we're gonna use this strategy on the Soviet Union. They'll never see it coming. They'll never expect it. We'll be done in 3 months. We'll have Moscow. So his generals knew, okay, this is literally the dumbest move in the history of military strategy. There's no way this is going to work on so many different levels. I don't want a hand in this. But they're all scared to death to tell Hitler this because, again, he had executed 84 generals during World War II. So they all stay silent. They're kind of looking at each other like, is this guy for real right now? We're going to invade a larger enemy while we're already fighting throughout Europe. Our resources are already tapped, and he's going to invade the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, to put it into perspective, At this time, they were basically like modern day China. They had, their army wasn't up to the standards of Nazi Germany, but it wasn't that far behind. And they literally had an endless amount of soldiers to throw to war. So it was a very stupid move. But Hitler became obsessed. His reasoning was the resources. We're starting to get tapped out on resources. Look, Germany's not a huge country, and there's only so much, for example, iron here. There's only so much that we can manufacture of this. We need more ports. We need more, petrol, gasoline. And this was part of the reason they took over smaller countries in Europe. But the big fish was always the Soviet Union. He knew from day one, I believe, we're going to at some point invade the Soviet Union. So that's Operation Barbarossa. Again, very interesting if you're into that kind of stuff. So the first miscalculation that Hitler makes, and his generals again know about, but they don't say a word, is we're going to blitzkrieg in. So he chooses a spot and time in which, okay, we've got 3 months. We'll be fine. We'll take it in 3 months. But his generals realize how big the Soviet Union is and how much resistance they're going to eventually face. And that's exactly what happens. And what else happens is wintertime sets in. They don't get to Moscow in 3 months, of course. They never actually get all the way there. But when winter sets in, the German soldiers that he sent to blitzkrieg in, they don't have winter coats. They're not outfitted for winter. They have enough supplies for roughly 3 months. And they begin, it gets to the point where their supply line was carried in, by trucks, obviously, but they were still using horse-drawn also. And they were getting to the point where they were starving and they were shooting the horses. And they were eating the horse meat. This is how bad off they were. Meanwhile, the Soviets are used to the cold. They're well outfitted for this. This is their playground now. They love to fight. You can also look up the Finland also, but the ghost soldiers. Pull those up from World War II. These folks were outfitted in all white. They were usually snipers, and they were excellent shots. So they begin to beat Germany back. The whole thing's a bust. Of course, he starts blaming, Hitler starts blaming all the generals around him. It's never his fault. Nothing is ever Adolf Hitler's fault, right? So this plays into D-Day because now you have a huge front in the war because the Soviet Union doesn't just beat him out of the country. The Soviet Union now, they want revenge. They want revenge for the things that happened in Stalingrad. They want revenge for the Germans were not very kind to the Soviets when they got to the civilian populations. Mass executions, really for no reason. Mass rapes. They just treated them very poorly. And so now the Russians, they want to get their revenge, or the Soviets in this case. So the Soviets are pushing towards Germany. Now Germany has a problem, and Adolf Hitler, they have a problem because they have this huge opponent knocking on their door. And you have the Western allies with, the British and the Americans and the Canadians, etc. And they're coming. Adolf Hitler, his spies, his intel was telling him they're going to land. He knew D-Day was coming. The problem for Adolf Hitler and his generals now, they didn't know where D-Day was coming. They didn't know where the landing was going to take place. There were 3 or 4 key places that they believed it would happen that made the most sense. So the Germans, the intel they had, of course, is the United States in particular, they're massing troops. They're training mass troops. They've got to be getting ready for an invasion. They're getting all their ships together. But again, they didn't know where they were going to land. So now you're defending against this huge enemy coming in from the Soviet Union. And now you have to somehow figure out how to defend the entire seawall. Because again, you don't know exactly where they're going to land. The United States in particular knew this. They knew that Adolf Hitler was scrambling. They knew that he was listening to every bit of intel that he got. And we often say, you'll hear me sometimes on Prepper Nation say, when it comes to war, information and supply lines, those are like your two main things. Without these two, you ain't winning the war, son. It ain't happening. So the U.S. knew, okay, we're going to feed him a lot of bad information. We're going to force Adolf Hitler and the Germans to make some bad decisions. And, you know, this would lead to the victory in D-Day. I'm going to explain to you how Hitler lost D-Day. All right, so he has an entire battalion of an entire division of Panzer tanks, the best of the best. All right, they're sitting here in reserve. They haven't been deployed, you know, to fight the Soviets. The Germans are managing on that front with the Soviets. So again, he's got an entire battalion of Panzer tanks, and they're all experienced drivers. The problem is he doesn't know what to do with them. His generals, in one of the rare instances, his generals go against him here, and they begin arguing with one another. So Hitler's air marshal is telling him, look, it doesn't matter where they land. The moment they land, my Air Force will mop them up. We're just going to go in. We're going to start basically blitzkrieg from the sky. We'll go in and we'll hammer them. We can handle it. We've got the best Air Force in the world. His field marshal is telling him, no, this is a bad decision. We need to keep the Tiger tanks, this huge group of Tiger tanks. We need to position them somewhere where they can respond anywhere. You know, they can get there very quickly. We need to find a spot to where you can deploy these bad boys anywhere. And so his two top guys are arguing with each other. They're saying, no, your strategy sucks. No, your strategy sucks. And Hitler, who usually, and this is a very weird decision by him, usually he would step in, and Hitler was the kind of guy where he thought he knew more than his top generals. Oh, you're an admiral? Well, you don't know anything. I'm Adolf Hitler, son. I know more than you do. So normally he would step in and he would just make the ultimate decision, and they would sit down and shut up. But Hitler, for some reason, he doesn't want to go against either general here. And I'm still not sure why. But I don't know if he doesn't want to make them mad, or maybe he's run out of generals. Hey, I can't execute another one, son. I don't know what his reasoning was here. But he decides, we're going to take this huge regiment of tanks and we're going to divide them in half. And we're going to pull half of them back to Berlin. Maybe he was thinking the Soviets are going to get to Berlin. I don't know. And we're going to leave the others in reserve, parked in a spot, you know, like his field general had suggested. But Hitler's like, I will have the ultimate say-so when these things are deployed. You're not going to be able to deploy them. And so this is a huge mess up. This cost Hitler and Nazi Germany D-Day. I mean, it truly did. If he would have listened to his field marshal, okay, if he would have just left all of the tanks together and they were in a central location, they would have been able to respond to the beaches of Normandy, and there were a few other small ones, but Normandy especially, and they would have drove the Allies back out to the sea. He didn't do that. Again, he splits them up in half. He's trusting his air marshal at this point, who is in way over his head. Air marshal thinks, you know, we have the best Air Force in the world. Turns out they didn't. They got beat back pretty quickly in the sky. So the Americans now, they get the intel that he has split, you know, his panzers up, and they were like, well, this is great, because all we have to do is feed Adolf Hitler and the Nazis some bad information. So George Patton, I'm sure you folks have heard of George Patton. He is like a war legend here in the United States. They call him in, and the U.S. is like, look, we're going to put you in charge of a ghost division. This division actually does not exist, but we are going to make it look like you were spearheading D-Day. And what they did was they took a map, they laid it out, all right, and they looked at Britain, and they looked at Europe, right, France, and they're looking for the closest spot on the map because they knew the Germans were looking at this also. A landing is probably going to happen at the closest spot. They don't want to travel over any more ocean than they have to. So, you know, right here in Britain, at that closest spot on the beach or near the beach, they begin massing a fake division of soldiers. The soldiers that were here were mostly injured. You know, they were just getting out of the hospital and everything like this. And instead of sending them directly home, they're like, hey, hang out here for a few weeks. You know, every so often, leave the mess hall and walk around in formation or whatever. And the U.S. used huge inflatables, like 1-to-1 scale inflatables of planes and tanks, the whole 9 yards. I mean, they made it look like from the sky because they knew the Germans were running recon planes. And so when these recon planes are up in the air over the ocean and they're looking down, they see tanks everywhere. They don't know they're inflatables, but they see landing craft everywhere. They see soldiers marching in formation. And then they get word back from their spies that George Patton is in charge of whatever's going on up here. So the Germans believe, okay, this is the invasion force. They're using their top war hero to lead it in, okay? That is why the U.S. chose George Patton. He was the bait. I hate to say it, but he was the bait. They knew Germany would bite on this. And so Germany begins shifting a lot of its assets up to this area because they're expecting the landing to be up here, when in reality the landing is going to be down here, and the Allies are going to traverse more ocean, and of course they're going to land at 3 different beaches: a Utah beach, and let me see here, Utah, and there are a couple more, of course, but they landed all over the place. They paratrooped in, things like this. But Normandy is going to be your main spot. And they even went a step further. When the invasion started taking place, this ghost, Patton-led ghost army, they were actually flying troop ships, carriers, over Germany, and they were dropping out paradummies, dummies with parachutes. And so the field marshal, now, when the field marshal is the first to recognize they've been had, and he's radioing in, he was like, you know, they're hitting us here in Normandy. We need the tanks. We need them right now. We need everything deployed here. This is the beachhead. Hitler still does not believe it because he's getting reports now that thousands of paratroopers are being dropped in the same spot where Patton was going to eventually land. So he fails to deploy the tanks. He fails to divert anything, you know, to Normandy. And so they are stuck with, I know it doesn't seem like it when you go back and you read about D-Day, but they really had a skeleton crew there. If you can imagine, you know, you ever worked a job and you just had a skeleton crew and everybody's pitching in and doing 2 and 3 jobs. That's what the Germans were facing, you know, during the invasion of Normandy. And so the Allies begin landing here, and by the time Hitler realizes he's been had, it's too late. The Allies had established a beachhead, and it was all over but the crying at that point, son. They were landing supply lines and stuff like that. That one decision to split the panzers up and then not to deploy them, not to listen to his field general, his field marshal, led to the Germans losing D-Day. And the rest, as they say, is history. The point I'm trying to make this morning is, or this evening, for you history folks catching it live, all 10 of you. I love y'all, man. The The point I'm trying to make is information is key. And this can be applied even to 2021. You don't have to apply it strictly to boots on the ground war. We live in an information age where a lot of you know the man, big brother, the elitists, whatever you want to call them. I call them the cabal. They want to know every move that you make. They want to know everything about you. They want to track your every movement. And what I'm here to tell you is sometimes you can throw out misinformation. You can play them, son. You just have to know how to do it. Misinformation and no information is the one thing that it gets under these elites' skin so bad. So if you want to mess with the elitists running the world here, throw out some misinformation. All right, y'all have a good night and God bless.